go dark?
No, we're on.
Okay, good.
Do you want to introduce what we're doing, or?
Okay, hi. We're doing the Q&A from Monday's live session on stages. Okay. I'm impressed I remembered.
Okay, so these are your questions from Monday, and we'll start with Jonathan Phillips. And Jonathan Phillips asks, can you maybe do a session on product design? Show all t-shirts, cups, plates, pins, etc. Talk about the process. How to choose designs for masks would be timely.
I don't see why not. Should we do that? It would involve a lot of things that are in prototype stage rather than complete.
Well, you've also done a lot though. There's lots of things that have been made. I mean, one of the things, I suppose it wasn't you placing them and positioning them, is the Valentino stuff.
Well, yeah, and I guess the sea urchin chair and the pods and things like that. Yeah, okay. I think that's a good idea. We'll do it. We're sort of rounded up. Yeah.
Will asks, have you ever experimented with tactile art, like for blind people with extra sensory elements beyond touch, like smells? There are probably some good sponsors for that.
Well, the answer simply is no. But David Pye, who I've mentioned on several occasions, and I do recommend anyone who's interested in the philosophy of design and craftsmanship, I absolutely recommend all and any of his books. He invented a machine that carved bowls rather than turning them, and he made some very beautiful ones. Shall I go and get one?
Sure.
I'll do that. Hang on a second.
Dad didn't introduce this really, so I'm going to sort of explain what's happening. I'm going to be going back to Japan, and so this is going to be our last Q&A sort of together in this format, but hopefully we're going to figure out a way of doing those sort of Zoom meeting lives where we can both get together and have a chat about your questions, and I can ask Dad your questions. Or we'll have to think of another way of doing it where Dad just sort of does it by himself like this. But yeah, I thought I'd better say that this is going to be the last one we do like this for now. And that it's been really, really good fun, and we've really enjoyed it. And actually, we've really enjoyed the time sort of talking about your questions as well, because there are lots of questions that come up that we haven't really talked about together that are about Dad's work or the way anyone would work, creativity and the architecture and logos and paintings. Lots of questions that I'd never thought to ask that we had an opportunity to talk about. So that's been really great for us too, having that impetus to discuss these things. And so hopefully we'll be able to get back to doing it again soon at some point. I try every time to get as many as I possibly can from the video that we do, and as always we probably won't get through all of them, and usually I say we'll get to them in the next one, and that might be something we can do. But you know, keep commenting on the videos and posting in the Facebook group, because Dad does go through it and I point things out to him as well, so it's for sure worth doing and staying interacting with this. I don't know where Dad is right now. I'm slightly concerned that I'm waffling on without him. I can almost hear footsteps. I suspect he's looking for something that he hasn't seen in 20 years, and so he may be some time. We mentioned as well last time the course that we've been doing has just been absolutely fantastic fun, and we've loved getting to know the 10 people who joined, who were quickest in there, and we're kind of really excited to keep going with this. So I think we're sort of just over halfway through now, and so it's been really successful. We've really enjoyed it, and hopefully everybody else does too. It seems like it. So we're thinking about the next kind of things that we want to do. And I asked you before for ideas about things you'd like to learn from Dad. We're talking about long and short courses. So the current one is 6 weeks, but we could also do like a full day, or we could do just like an hour or so on specific things. And we'd really like to know what you guys would want to learn.
Okay.
Goodness sake.
I'm holding it to the light because it has...
No one can see anything.
Okay. It has sort of spiral grooves, and it's handmade to the extent that hand-turned bowls are handmade, but he invented this machine that makes these very beautiful grooves, and it's a very beautiful bowl. And in an exhibition of his work, he would have a little sign saying, "Please touch, please handle." And his view was that some materials, like wood and leather, are much improved by constant handling. So his view of exhibitions of wood pieces is that you do touch them, you do handle them, and you don't hold them in.
It looks like it's been constantly sat in.
Behave. Okay, so it's, some materials lend themselves very well to being touched and handled, and wood is one. And this is a very good example. But I've never done it specifically, and I'd be interested to think about that. It's a good idea.
Think about what?
Making a tactile exhibition.
Ah, right. I think it's... I try and do it with all of my exhibitions, have different things like smells and music and everything, so that I think the things that you remember most are things that really hit all of your senses in a way that connect really nicely. So like, I remember films where I've had something really lovely and special to eat while I've been watching them. And I remember people and their smell as well.
Right.
And I think the more things you can kind of combine, that the stronger the impression. I think for children especially, like if you think back of memories you had when you were a child, it's usually things together, isn't it? Like the taste of something along with the, smell of something, along with the place.
I find that if I'm looking at a particular part of a painting, I go and look at it, and I'll suddenly come into my mind the story I was listening to when I painted it, and the opposite too. If I'm listening to a tape, which I often do multiple times, I get the painting I did when I first listened to it. So
yeah, I was thinking that about this painting that I'm working on, because I've been listening to that book about what happens to cadavers after you die. If you specifically request something interesting like that they used for science, how that then carries on. And I thought, if I keep this painting, I don't know if I want to think of that while I look at it. So I might have to change to my family and other animals.
There you go.
So I look at it and see Corfu rather than decapitated heads and trays.
There you go.
Next question.
Well, next question.
Or have you got more thoughts about that? You've got to come to Team Lab in Tokyo and see that, because they do that so incredibly well. That kind of lights and sounds and water and...
We will do that. I will go to Tokyo and you can take me.
Actually, one of my colleagues in Tokyo wanted to do something with Dad, where with Dad's retreat pod kind of things. So my friend has, I can never remember the name of this type of cooking. It's like micro gastronomic, I can't remember. It's the fancy stuff anyway that's really tiny and strange. And he's got 2 Michelin stars, and he's fantastic. It's amazing. And he wanted to do something with your pods where you sit inside and you get a full multi-sensory experience with the food. And his menus always have a story, so he tells you the story while you're eating.
You should tell him those pods were also Martin's. I mean, Martin designed them originally. Okay, yeah. Next question.
Oh, right, okay. Eric asks, what is Mr. Dean's favourite musical instrument, and does he play it?
I don't know that I have a favourite musical instrument. I did find it for a long time very difficult to listen to brass. I was not a fan of brass, but then I became a fan. I learned to like it. I don't play a musical instrument, but I always love the sound of a theremin, and I just wish there was more. I wish it was used more and more as a solo instrument. I mean, I know it's in music like Good Vibrations, and a lot of 30s science fiction music used it a lot, but it's not out there in a way I thought it could be. So yeah, I suppose.
Can you do like scales and stuff with a theremin? Do you tune it, or is it just you just intuit it while you're playing?
I just like the sort of swooping sound of it.
Excuse me in my emails. Have you got one? Have you played it? Have you tried?
No. I should set about getting one and playing with it.
But you did used to play the drums, didn't you?
Yes, but not at a level I would be readily employed.
Can you give us a...
No.
Okay.
Absolutely not.
Athena asks, tell us your best Spinal Tap moments of set malfunctions. There must have been some.
The sets work perfectly. We never had a malfunction.
It's funny you say that, because I remember watching Spinal Tap for the first time and you being like, oh, this has happened so many times. This is just like when he couldn't get out of that pod, you're like, they've taken this off, yes, they've taken this off.
Well, yes and no. I mean, Rick did make a point about an incident about Alan being trapped in the drum kit.
But that doesn't count because he's a drummer. And that's what happens to drummers, isn't it?
No, I was going to say it doesn't count because it was an invented story.
Oh.
It never went wrong. I mean, we did suffer from issues of sabotage. That was true. That was true, and that was really shameful. But the sets never went wrong. They were so simple. They weren't easy things to go wrong. It's very simple stuff. Now, I suppose things could have gone wrong. I guess there was a brilliant road crew that made sure it didn't. No.
Well, that's a boring answer.
I'm afraid it is. They worked.
What about other things that have gone wrong? Exhibitions, or you got any funny Spinal Tappy stories of anything? What about for the band? Do you think any of the members of Spinal Tap are based on any of the band members?
I would think half the bands that were performing in the 70s recognised elements of that film.
Oh, it's such a shame. I wish I could. Maybe I could hold it up. We found this recorded bit of Dad talking about album covers, and he's wearing a green vest and he's got long brown wavy hair, and the way that he talked and the way that he looked reminded me exactly of Nigel Tufnell in Spinal
How dare you?
And even to the point where when I think back on it, I confuse you both in my mind.
You're a horror. I think I'm going to have to fire Fred.
That's that sort of like
better
mock
behave.
me. Sorry. Should we carry
So
on?
you should be.
So, Galen asks, did you get to revisit set lighting with modern LED colour systems, wider colour spectrum and computer control? More fun, right?
Well, I never did, really. Yes, I'm using LEDs now, of course, and a lot. But I never designed the lights. really we designed, worked with one or two really good lighting guys who were very willing to talk and work with me on the stage. Some weren't, and they never managed to light the stage as a consequence. So there was a problem working with lighting guys. They very territorial, meant we never did it. But the chap who started the 2003-4 35th anniversary tour, he was really good, and he really engaged with the idea that this was an illuminated world as well as lighting the band. And the point about it, the real point about doing a stage, is to entertain the audience and to enhance the music.
I mean, in a way, that's a multi-sensory exhibition. You've got the music and the lighting and the artwork.
If it's seen that way, it really works. Some people who do lighting light the band, and there are issues with that. I mean, Chris used to say he doesn't want a red light on his Rickenbacker when he's playing it, because he can't see it. So there was never a red light on it, as far as I know. But then if you watched him, he wasn't really looking at it a lot of the time. So you would imagine with that degree of expertise, he would be playing by touch, and he was. Sometimes he would have his head down, but it would be an interesting thing. And I think, lighting the band and lighting the set and entertaining the public are really, in my mind, two different things. They can be done in parallel, but they are different things. And one of the issues has always been getting that rapport right. And as I say, not every lighting guy who worked with Yes was interested in doing anything other than his thing.
Do they not have directors like you would in a theatre for the production of the experience?
No.
That would be a good idea, maybe, would it not? Is it not necessary?
It wasn't really necessary if everybody worked together, but when they didn't, there should have been a hierarchy, which would have meant that things could have got done properly. Didn't always happen. So I guess I'm saying there are Spinal Tap moments.
But your issue with the lighting men usually rather than...
I do remember I never mentioned it when we did the talk, but we did do a really elaborate stage for the Rolling Stones. They were going to do a big tour of America, and I had several conversations with Mick Jagger about sets, and I designed one that would go on a number of trucks and would open up automatically like that. I'll show you the picture of that. And it was
I'm just turning my phone on silent because it keeps going off. Sorry everyone.
okay.
You're about to show us the Rolling Stones.
Yeah. This is the design I did for the Rolling Stones. And it would have been on multiple trucks, and it would have all opened up, I guess, like a fantastic insect. But it would have been quite expensive. And I remember being quite exasperated because I was knowing it was going to be expensive. I went and saw Mercedes, the truck people, and I showed them, and I said, we need a sponsor, and they were really up for it. And so I did this presentation it was Mick Jagger and a guy called Chipmunk who was doing their lighting at the time, and I showed it to him, and he had questions about it, but when he said, this looks like it's going to be very expensive, and I said, I know it's going to be incredibly expensive, but in terms of PR, it'll earn its keep. However, Mercedes have said they'll sponsor it. And he looks at me and he says, I don't want their logo on our stage. I thought, give me a break. So it was not a successful meeting with him. I thought it was a great design. But he did ask, where would we put the Super Troopers? Now, the Super Troopers are giant carbon arc lights from medieval times. Basically, it's two pieces of carbon coming together with a spark between them, and they're basically burning. And they're incredibly bright, but massively heavy. And in a theatre, you have them dotted around in upper areas. And he said, well, where would you put those? And I said, that's not a problem. We put them behind your equipment and aim them up at a mirror, a plastic mirror. So there's nothing in terms of weight out there. So it'd be cantilevered from the back of the stage along with everything else that is. And it would be, to all intents and purposes, weightless compared to the massive weight of the Super Troopers. And all you need to do is gently adjust the angle of the mirror. And I said it would take a little bit of getting used to because it's less intuitive than aiming a giant gun at somebody. But it's nevertheless an hour's practice and you'd start doing okay with it. And that idea did get incorporated into their stage. We didn't get credited, but they did use it. But that whole, it tells you how long ago it is now when all bands get whatever sponsorship they can. But to say he didn't want Mercedes logo on the stage was deeply frustrating and exasperating. C'est la vie. But that happened before we did the Tales tour. And to talk again about the Tales tour, something I should have said on the day, was that it was the first ever major rock and roll stage. Several bands had been theatrical in their presentation, like David Bowie, but no one had a full-on stage, separate from the lighting. You know, several bands had massive lighting rigs, but this was the first time any band had an actual stage set that was theatrical. There's a lot of firsts on that tour. That tour was the first tour in America where there was coast-to-coast merchandising in a kind of a unified way. Prior to that, there was all kinds of different promoters over the States did their own merchandising. We did it across the board. And so that was a first. Having a band identity, I mean, the idea of a brand identity as opposed to a band identity is commonplace now. It wasn't then. So to have the sort of band having a visual identity that was underlined on everything throughout the tour, that was a first, and that was good fun. That was a fight.
Were you involved with the merchandising, or was that?
Yeah, we back then we designed it and produced it. We were flying out tons of paper on a regular basis. We got a lot wrong. We printed T-shirts outside of the States and shipped them in, which always meant customs problems. We shipped in a lot of paper when we should have focused almost entirely on T-shirts. But Yes's management at the time was very anxious because he said they made $40,000 clear profit on merchandising. And he was worried that this would burn up all their profit. But in fact, it made a net profit of more than $250,000, which is nothing compared to what it was the next year and years later. But for a first, and we had to learn everything from scratch, it was very good. Anyway, next question.
Thank you.
Sorry?
I said thank you.
Okay, sorry. A wandering question.
No, I meant as in you didn't say bless you.
Bless you. Get on with it.
Mike asks, do you know where these sets are today?
The 35th anniversary sets are in Yes's storage in Los Angeles. The Relaya set, which is a fantastic giant puppet, I don't know where that is. And we had an inquiry once from the V&A wanting to keep it. So if we could have laid our hands on it, that would have been very good. The Tales sets, I don't know where they are. Alan had them for a long time. and they were in Wales. But last time I talked to him, he seemed to think they'd been passed on to somebody else when he sold the property or something. I don't know.
Would they be very expensive to remake?
Not really, no. They could be remade. We've been thinking about having a fully automated, computer-driven, LED-lit quarter-scale model, which would be quite big, but nevertheless, as a model. And that was for an exhibition, and that might yet happen. So that's an interesting alternative to rebuilding.
Can I suggest inflatable floors and walls to go around it?
No. Bands have enough trouble standing up.
They don't need to go in. If it's quarter size, kids can play in it.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. We'll do something else for that.
And me. Okay. So you don't know?
No, only the one.
Will asks, have you ever designed a vehicle wrap? You have done plane concepts, but what about cars?
Yeah, I've done that. A couple. I don't know where they are, but the designs for them I still have.
What were they for?
One of them was for a Mini that was a prize on one of the cruises. The other one was actually for...
And they didn't use it, did they?
They didn't, no. They did do the Mini, but they didn't use the wrap. I'll look them out. See what records we have of them.
So someone driving around in a car that has a wrap that you designed?
Could be. But it's a long time ago, so I expect the car fell apart long before the wrap did.
Mike asks, when you get the house together, would it be possible to rent it out for a night?
Possible.
If we get our Kickstarter on, it might be a prize for someone who's put lots of money in.
There you go.
Gina asks, what is the piece of artwork on the table behind you both when you're sitting?
Rick Griffin sculpture.
Well, we could go through a couple of options. Probably that, I guess.
Depends what day it was, because there have been different ones on different days.
So this is Rick Griffin.
I mean, there was your medical torso was here for a while, wasn't it?
I don't think she's thinking of that.
All right. Was it painting or sculpture?
It doesn't say piece of artwork on the table behind you both. So I think it probably is that.
Yeah, it's probably that Rick Griffin bronze. Brian Chambers produces them. So I think it's gallery's called the Chambers Project. Yeah.
You said that mostly to me very quietly.
Oh, right. I wasn't totally sure the name of his gallery, but if you look up Brian Chambers and Rick Griffin, you'll find it. And he is in the middle of producing another Rick Griffin bronze from the Man from Utopia series.
Next question?
Yeah.
David asks, is your next book going to be titled Curved Space? Also, the Dean Academy would be a perfect milieu for a course or research in the psychology of space. That's a really good point. That would be great to do. We need some qualified teachers.
I wonder who. Well, yes, there's a possibility. We had a company called Curved Space that was doing the architecture. We still own the name, and it is a possibility. We've been looking at two ideas combining, doing a course on the creative process and on defensive space or defensible space, which is a lot about the psychology of the architecture was about defensible space. that could be a really good idea too. And it did occur to me that I have said it, but I can say it again now quite emphatically, that I learnt a lot about art and the nature of art from doing kendo for many years. And I would say that also helped me understand some aspects of defensible space too. So, yeah. So we've been talking about this very thing, whether we do a book, whether we do a course, or whether we just do a film about the creative process. Do you have any thoughts on that?
On that specifically,
Yeah.
or
On whether we should do a course or a book or what on the creative process?
yeah, definitely. I think we should do. Well, I think actually doing these separate courses are really good starting points for building on any of those subjects, because if you think about the course that we've been doing, we've been learning, like you said, a lot from them too, and that having that feedback loop of sort of honing how you feel about these things and how things work, I think is a really good grounding for then doing bigger projects.
Yes. I am quite keen to look into this, because I think doing a course on the creative process per se is not just for artists, it's for everybody. I've interviewed lots of people and was interviewed once by a scientist, and scientists, writers, musicians, artists, that process of having that flash of inspiration is common. It's universal, whatever your particular challenge is, and how to encourage that and how to capitalize on it and how to convert it from wow into there it is in the real world. It's a challenge for all of us, and I think it's really interesting. It's really interesting to understand how it works and how it happens and how to bring it to life.
But I think also lots of people don't think they have creativity at all, and yet they do painting, and yet they do needlework, and yet they do some mucking about on the guitar. Lots of people seem to feel alienated from the idea of creativity because they're not a professional artist or something like that. And I think what would be nice is to have a course that also just makes people realise how pervasive it is in everything that you do. Nobody doesn't have it, really.
I think the issue is very often recognising it and then being able to convert it.
Yeah, I mean, I think Japan and England have a lot of crossovers, and one of the things that I think about that is they've sort of made an icon of this idea of the salary man, the guy who goes to work every day for the company and all he does is clock in and clock out and kind of relentlessly does his job and nothing else apart from get drunk afterwards. And there's this idea that there are huge swathes of people who just kind of go to work and that's their raison d'etre. And I think there are lots of people who don't think of themselves as creative, even though I've never met anyone there who doesn't make incredible things of some sort and who doesn't have an eye aesthetically. And I think the idea for an English person going over there that anyone doesn't have this sort of sense is ludicrous, and I guess that would be the same anywhere.
I think the modern Japanese concept of the salaryman is an incredible travesty of a Japanese philosopher from the 18th century who basically he had this idea that work is a means to enlightenment. So you do what you do better and better every day. You do your job better and better. And that idea of polishing the process and perfecting what you do, not for the sake of work, but for the sake of your spirit and your soul, was very important. He started schools and colleges all over Japan back then, and there is a trace of that, not a trace, a big important part of that in the Japanese notion of perfecting things, but it's kind of screwed up with that idea of putting in the hours.
But I also think it's a really cynical exploitation that's happening there as well as here and everywhere. This idea that if you work harder you'll make more money. And I think every nation in the world went through a blip where that was true, and it's not the case anymore. If these guys going for their salary jobs, being employed, thinking that if they do 80 hours a week someone will reward them, that's not what's happening anymore. The people who have the money are keeping it. And it's the same thing here, but because two incomes isn't enough, one income isn't enough anymore, everybody has to work, and I think they're taking advantage of the idea that the more you do it, the better you'll be.
There is a sort of sad irony that a lot of Japanese companies recognise that in Scandinavia they are just as productive on half the hours. They know that's true, but they don't adopt that policy of people counting people's productivity as opposed to how many hours they put in. And I think one of the things that might happen in England, because it's hit here so badly for a while over the lockdown, is that some people recognise that productivity went up when people were working fewer hours and doing it at home. And in the end, that has to be the measure. Are you doing what you need to do, not how many hours you put in? And I think Japan has to relearn its own lessons, because I think his name was pronounced Beigen, and I'm not sure. Beigen, is that how it was?
I think so.
He was a great philosopher, and I think they need to re-listen to his ideas.
I don't think it's about that, Dad. People are just trying to survive everywhere. And even if people are more productive if they're working fewer hours and from home, the problem is if you're working fewer hours and from home, you start thinking. And that isn't good for your company, because you might think, I don't actually like this company. I don't like the product they produce. I don't enjoy what I'm doing. I might look around and find something else. Whereas if you're exhausted and you're never at home during working hours, you don't have time or energy.
Well, that's a very cynical, possibly true view of it. You know your boss is going to watch this.
I'm also aware of the fact I'm going back in a week. It's happening everywhere. It's not just there, it's here too. We're all being taken advantage of.
Well, I'm going to just say one thing about the creative process, and that is that if what you're doing, if you can get to that mindset where you're not thinking and not worrying about what you're doing, you disengage from that, and you just, what I've been saying is you listen to a story or something, meditate, prayer, whatever. Take your mind out of the equation. Don't be anxious about deadlines. Just listen to the story and do it. Joy and tranquility are far more powerful tools to getting something done than anxiety and pressure. And that's absolutely true and provable. It's not just a philosophy. That's also an aspect of how our brain actually works. If we're relaxed, if we're daydreaming, if we're disengaged from the minutiae of the work, we do it better. And yes, if you're not enjoying it, you're not joyful, you're less likely to be productive and absolutely less likely to be creative. So we should have a course for bosses.
But it depends on whether or not they consider their employees' mental health and productivity something they're interested in.
Why would they employ people if they weren't? Don't answer, I know. Okay, where are we?
We are at Eric.
Okay.
And Eric asks, could you do a live design for a logo or font, maybe for Freya?
Well,
that's his question. I didn't add that last bit.
Yes, I know. I know. I was going to say, you're probably past the age where you'd let anyone do anything for you like that. But the idea of doing a live session on designing anything is interesting. Actually, I would be interested. Would you?
Yeah, I mean, I imagine there'd be a lot of like dead air while you're just sort of thinking about something.
Yeah, maybe we do a 3-hour program and edit it.
Yeah, because the designing bit just involves quite a lot of thinking as well, doesn't it?
Not thinking, but absent staring into space, and it does. Yes. There's nothing entertaining about watching somebody stare into space. And that's when the work is getting done, actually. It's not when you're doing it. When you're doing it, you're capturing that and interpreting it, and you get feedback from that. But
well, what you could do maybe is come up with a hypothetical logo. Say there's a company that's, I don't know.
Oh, no.
What?
I wouldn't want to waste all that effort on a hypothetical logo.
Okay, well,
hypothetical painting is great. I love painting, and it's good to end up with a painting.
Yeah, okay, I haven't finished. So you could have you could do it on a live project, or you could do it on a project you've done already. But what I was thinking is, what you could do live is show your actual thought process that you had, and you could show, well, this is what I sketched out, and I thought this company needs something that, you know, you can see visually expresses this aspect of what they do, so I put in some water because it's an eco company and they work with water and the sea, and then I thought, you know, it's based in Hawaii, so I thought, what's iconically Hawaiian? Lava. We had it, you know.
Well, Freya's actually describing a logo I actually did, which was a mixture of water and lava.
Well, and draw it out while you like how you did. That might be a way of doing it, so it's watchable.
Yeah. Well, clearly the answer is it's intriguing to think about how we might do that. Finding a subject and figuring out how to do it. Yeah, So I guess my answer is in principle yes. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that would be a really good one.
Yeah.
It might be one you need Matt helping on, so you can get someone kind of really watching while you're.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Film it rather than do it live. Just because aspects of it can be done live, but there are aspects of it that are, as I say, staring to space, not necessarily entertaining.
I don't know. Could you watch this for an hour?
Yeah, easy. All right. Was that the last question?
No, we've got one more.
All right.
Kaya asks, are either of you into astrology?
Oh, afraid not. Are you?
I say no, but I totally am.
Maybe I am, but I still say no.
I'm only into the astrology that I find flattering. So I particularly like Chinese astrology because I think I'm very much like, so I'm Year of the Rabbit, and I think the description generally of that sign is exactly me.
Really?
Yeah. And I think an interesting way of doing it actually is like, because I'm a Virgo as well, and I don't think I probably am actually. Someone literally met me on a plane. I was talking to this girl on an aeroplane, and and I got out my little diary to show her, and she was like, "Oh, I have a journal too. What do you write in it?" And I said, "Oh, mostly lists." And she said, "Are you a Virgo?" And I was like, "Oh, yes." So probably, I guess I am. But I think if you overlay them and layer them, it's really fun too. So yes, I'm a Virgo, and they're very sort of pernickety and you know, like things a certain way. But I'm also a rabbit, and they're aesthetes, and they enjoy fun and meeting people and socialising. But I'm also a bear in American Indian astrology and a swan in Celtic. And I think if you just cherry pick what you like about the best things, that's...
So you paid no attention to it at all, have you?
It's fun, why not? I think self-mythologizing is really healthy, and why not do it? And you're just a flat no. But you're very like a monkey, which is your Chinese one. Like Mum and I read up Dad's Chinese sign, which was a monkey, and we were like, yes, 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 yes.
We are, well, what can I say? Hooligans. All right. Well, I think we're done. As this was nominally about the stages, I would say that they are something I would like to do more of. I've always enjoyed it. We've had a number of projects be presented to us over the years that have never come to pass, so they've kind of been interesting meetings with people. But yeah, amongst the jobs that we get offered, they are the ones that I tend to look at thinking, yeah, this could be interesting.
Yeah, I really want to do more big 3D things that you can get in and climb around. And I went to visit my friend who's got a son, and her partner has a little boy as well. And we went to the local park, and I just forgot how fun it is going to the park and like climbing things and swinging on things and spinning on things. It's just so fun. I don't think anyone ever grows out of it. I think you just start wearing clothes where it's impractical doing it and you start feeling embarrassed. But I don't think anyone grows out of the fun of that.
Then do it.
Yeah, but I want to do it in something that's big and amazing and magical and impressive, that makes some sort of point and changes the way you see the world by making you feel a certain way by being in it.
Something simple then. Yes, yeah, yes. I mean, when we were building the architecture, it was incredibly exciting when we first took out the internal moulds and we could walk around inside it. That goes back quite a long time. And that was brilliant because I had hoped it would have a certain effect. And when it did, when it had that effect in spades, it was really fantastic. It was very exciting.
And I think it's important to put those things in the world, because I had a dream last night about this huge castle. I often dream about castles, and it just occurred to me that I dream about those things because dreams throw up things that you see that mean something. And actually, if your architecture isn't in the world, we can't put that into people's consciousness or subconsciousness or way of thinking.
As you can tell, I'm under some guidance about getting my act together and building it, which we will.
If only everyone would just listen to me. The world would be amazing.
She means me, and I do listen. Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us.
For the last 3 months.
For the last 3 months. We're not doing a live show for the next 2 Mondays, so we're effectively doing a 3-week break from this, which I apologise, and when we come back, Freya will be back in Japan, so we're not quite sure how we'll work that. But in the meantime, thank you for being here. Thank you for being here for, as Freya says, the whole of lockdown. It's been incredible fun for me. I've loved it. Being bossed about.
I've 99% loved it.
Thank you. I saw that, and I can see it again in the photos. Okay.
Bye. You press finish.
This.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.